Keisha Williams had only recently enrolled at a new school. She grew up in a community where survival was a matter of learning to fight, where 8 years of mixed martial arts had made fists into weapons. She was a black belt, swathed in adolescent silence. But the bullies did not notice. They noticed a quiet black girl with no friends, an easy target. So they approached her with threats and demands, building the harassment daily. Then one day, they crossed a line. Laughter followed. Someone said she deserved it. The hallway looked on, but Keisha didn't crumble. They thought she was fragile. They thought she'd swallow it. They were mistaken. Prior to going any further, comment where on earth you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's tale is one you wouldn't want to miss. The alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., but Keisha Williams was up already, looking at the strange ceiling of her new bedroom. Detroit was a lifetime away, though it had only been 3 days since the moving van drove away from their old home. She got out of bed and crept to the basement where her mom had already placed the heavy bag in the corner. 40 minutes later, sweat clung to her brow as she completed her morning drill. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The combinations came as easily as breathing. 8 years of training had ingrained the movements within her, but today they felt different. Today, breakfast, her mother called out from upstairs. Dr. Patricia Williams was at the stove, still in her scrubs from her night shift at Millbrook General. How are you feeling about today, baby? Okay. Keisha took a piece of toast. Just another school. Her mother's eyes were concerned. I know this adjustment isn't going to be easy. Millbrook is not what we're used to. Different was an understatement. As Keisha stepped through the front doors of Millbrook High, the sea of white faces told her the same thing she already knew. Out of 800 students, she could count the black faces on 2 hands. The corridors hummed with normal morning vigor, but conversation suddenly stopped as she went by. Whispers trailed in her footsteps. She kept her head high, shoulders loose, the way Master Chen had shown her. Never display weakness, but never seek trouble either. Period 1, biology was okay. Period 2, history was acceptable. But lunch was where the real schooling took place. The cafeteria stretched out like a social chart. Popular students staked out the center tables. Jocks controlled one corner, theater types huddled near the windows. Keisha reached for a sandwich and searched for an open spot. Well, well, look what wandered into here. The voice traveled across 3 tables. Derek Morrison was 6'2", with the type of assured swagger born of never being called on. His Letterman jacket fit comfortably on wide shoulders, and his grin never reached cold blue eyes. Behind him, Jake Wilson cracked his knuckles, and Tommy Bradley snickered. The cafeteria went silent, all eyes focused on the fight developing in the middle of the room. Keisha had pressed on toward an open table, but Derek blocked her path. I'm talking to you. His voice held the effortless command of a person accustomed to being listened to. We must have a talk. She broke away from his stare without blenching. About what? About how things work around here. Derek's grin spread, revealing too many teeth. See, new students typically pay a little welcoming fee. Call it insurance. Ensure nothing unpleasant occurs to them. Jake and Tommy bracketed her flanks, close enough that she could smell their cologne. The cafeteria stayed dead silent. 200 students watching like it was dinner theater. Insurance against what? Keisha's tone remained even, inquisitive instead of aggressive. Accidents, Derek shrugged. Lockers jamming, books disappearing, people running into you in the corridors. Amusing how awkward some people are here, especially those who do not belong, Tommy supplemented, with a derogatory smile. Keisha put her lunch tray on the closest table. When she faced Derek again, her stance remained loose, but something changed in her eyes. I don't pay protection money. The words hung there like a challenge. Derek's smile only hesitated for an instant before coming back in full force. That's where you're wrong, girl. Everyone pays. Question is whether you pay easy or you pay hard. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow penetrated the quiet room. Unless you think you're too good for our little system here, think you're better than the rest of us. I don't pay at all. She headed toward the empty table with her tray. For a moment, Derek stood there, clearly not anticipating outright refusal. The cafeteria waited. "This isn't over," he yelled after her, loudly so everyone could hear. "Nobody disrespects me in my school. Nobody." Keisha sat down and opened her sandwich as if nothing had occurred, but her peripheral vision followed Derek's every step as he stormed out with his crew in following. At a table across the room, Marcus Thompson shook his head and growled to his friend, "Girl has no idea what she just started." The discussion slowly picked up, but the tone had shifted. Word would travel throughout the school before the lunchtime was over. The new girl had just made war with Derek Morrison. Keisha bit into her sandwich slowly. She'd hoped to make it through at least a day without issues, but some things were unavoidable. And standing down to Bullies was never something she'd done. The question wasn't really if Derek would strike back. It was when and how far he'd go. The bullying began before second period was over. Keisha headed to her locker, keys in hand, but the lock would not turn. She tried again, double-checking the combination she'd memorized that morning. Nothing. Having trouble? Jake Wilson appeared beside her, grinning. Locks can be tricky when they get damaged. She looked at the mechanism. Someone had stuck gum in the keyhole. Real mature? Just the beginning, Jake said, walking backwards so he could observe her reaction. Derek's got a long memory. Third period American history crawled by without anything happening. But as Keisha was picking up books, she realized her notebook was gone, the one with 3 days' worth of notes. She checked her bag twice before waving it off. In the hallway, she saw Tommy Bradley flaunting the notebook to a cluster of freshmen, gesturing wildly as he recited her handwriting in a mocking tone. "Look at this fancy scribbling. Must think she's real special." Keisha walked up calmly. "That's mine." "Prove it." Tommy waved it overhead like a playground thug. "Maybe if you beg politely, I'll think about handing it back." She didn't beg. She didn't lunge for it either. Instead, she got out her phone and took a picture of him holding it. "What are you doing?" Tommy's swagger faltered.
She tucked the phone back in her pocket just in case I have to make a theft report. Tommy's face reeled, but he hurled the notebook at her feet before disappearing down the hall. The pages fluttering around the hallway floor as Keisha knelt to gather her notes, a pair of scuffed sneakers emerged from her line of sight. She raised her head to find Marcus Thompson, the same student who'd made the comment during lunch. "You could use some advice," Marcus murmured, looking around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "I'm listening." Derek Morrison isn't just some rich kid playing hard. His dad owns half the shops in town, including the car lot where my mom is employed. His uncle's the police chief. When Derek sets something in motion, it happens. Keisha stood holding her recovered notes. "Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm trying to save you." Marcus's voice held sincere concern. "Last year there was this kid, Miguel Santos, transfer student like you. Derek decided Miguel was getting too chummy with some girl Derek liked. Miguel ended up with a broken nose and 3 cracked ribs. Fell down some stairs as per the official report. And you think that I think Miguel switched schools 2 weeks later?" Marcus leaned in closer. "Look, I see standing up feels great, but Derek does not fight fairly, and he does not fight by himself. Whatever you are considering doing, don't." Before Keisha could reply, Marcus dissolved back into the crowd of students changing classes. The afternoon saw escalating harassment. Someone accidentally poured chocolate milk on her backpack at lunch. In chemistry lab, her safety goggles disappeared, coercing her to wear a scratched pair that caused it to be impossible to read measurements distinctly. By 6th period, a pattern had developed. Derek's group took turns making her life miserable, always with plausible deniability, always with witnesses who only saw accidents, not harassment. But 7th period crossed the line. Keisha sat in English class struggling to pay attention to the discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird when Derek raised his hand. "Mrs. Patterson, I think we should hear from our newest student about this book. I bet she has some real insights into the themes." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Hello, Keisha. Would you like to comment on Harper Lee's depiction of racial injustice?" The staging was clearly there, but Keisha replied seriously. Talking about the book's themes of prejudice and moral courage, she went on for 2 minutes, speaking clearly and cleverly. When she had finished, Derek began slow clapping. "Bravo! That was so well said. You're so articulate for—" He stopped, letting the inference dangle. "I mean, it's good to hear someone who can speak so eloquently." The room was quiet. Mrs. Patterson's face reddened, but she appeared paralyzed as to how to respond to the clear racial connotation without inciting further escalation. "Thank you," Keisha replied coolly. "I appreciate you recognizing my skill at communicating effectively." Derek's grin wavered at her flat tone, but he continued, "It's just a change of pace, you know. Occasionally, individuals from certain cultures have difficulty with scholarly debate." The room hung in silence. A few students shifted restlessly in their seats. "I'm sure you'll discover that individuals of all walks of life can surprise you," Keisha responded, her voice firm as steel. When the bell sounded, she closed her books without haste, heading out with her head held high. But inside, something had solidified. The games were through. Derek had just stepped over a line that could not be undone. In the hall, she could hear Derek laughing with his friends, probably patting himself on the back over his clever act. He had no concept of what he just released. Friday morning began with Keisha discovering her locker festooned. Someone had stuck a banana to the metal door with a note in Derek's handwriting that said, "Welcome to the jungle," in his signature scrawl. She took it down without expression, knowing the students were converging to see her response. Some of them looked guilty. Others giggled. Keisha crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash but retained the tape as proof. "Oh, did you not enjoy your gift?" Derek emerged with his typical group talking loudly enough for the increasing crowd to hear. "I thought you would be missing the city wilds." "Imaginative," Keisha said, closing her locker with intentional composure. "But you could try improving your handwriting. It is clear who the source is." Derek's jaw clenching. He wasn't accustomed to his target speaking back at all, alone in public. "Maybe you need a lesson in respect. Maybe you need a lesson in common human decency." The hallway was abuzz with hushed responses. Students pulled out phones, catching on to something bigger happening. All morning, during PE, the harassment escalated. Someone had placed itching powder in her sports uniform. At lunch, Jake Wilson intentionally pushed into her, spilling her tray onto the floor. "Oops," Jake remarked, not trying to conceal his smile. "Hope you're not too clumsy to pick it up." Keisha crawled around on the floor to collect the scattered food as students walked around her. A few of them volunteered to assist, but she shooed them away. She could take Derek's antics. What she couldn't take was the assembly of spectators who seemed to relish the entertainment. The breaking point was reached in 8th period study hall. Keisha sat by herself at a corner table working on calculus assignments when Derek and his gang approached. The study hall monitor had ventured out and left 30 students unsupervised. "Hello all," Derek broke the news in a voice that echoed across the room. "I've got something I want to share." He took out his phone and abruptly, Keisha's voice echoed across the room through a tiny Bluetooth speaker. It was her English class discussion from the previous day, but edited and manipulated. Her reflective comments on racial injustice had been intercut with audio bits to give the impression that she was uttering inflammatory remarks about whites. The doctored recording portrayed her as a seething racist outsider who despised her new school and all of them there. Students appeared shocked, bewildered, some outraged. "Guess we know how she feels about us," Derek said, stuffing his phone into his pocket with satisfaction. "Good thing we got to hear what she really thinks." Keisha sat stuck as murmurs rose around her. Some of the students appeared suspicious, others revulsed. A few appeared to know the sound was fabricated, but their voices were lost in the din of those who thought they had heard it. "That's not what I said."
Keisha's words rose above the din, but Derek spoke over her. "Are you lying to me? Everyone heard you. Everyone heard you fake recordings to get me to sound like something I'm not." Derek moved closer to her table. "Why would I have to fake anything? We all heard what sort of human being you actually are." The study hall doors swung open, and Mrs. Chen, the monitor, walked back in. The room grew quiet, students suddenly interested in their homework. "Is everything okay in here?" Mrs. Chen asked, picking up on the tension. "Perfect," Derek said with his politician's smile, just having a friendly debate about current events. As soon as the bell had rung, Keisha packed up her books with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. Students streamed out, some not looking at anyone, others looking directly at her. The harm was done. Tomorrow, Derek's edited tape would be everywhere on social media. As she headed to her last class, she heard snatches of talk. "I can't believe she said all that. Seems so shy and nice." Derek was right to think that of her.
At her locker after school, Marcus was waiting for Keisha. "That recording was a setup," he murmured. "I was in English class. I heard what you really said. Doesn't bigger now." Keisha removed her jacket. "Damage is done." "You could battle it, demonstrate it was edited, or I could battle the source." Marcus put his hand on her arm. "Don't go and do anything stupid. Derek's waiting for you to lash out. He's probably mapping out how to make you the aggressor, how to get you in trouble or arrested." Keisha's eyes met Marcus's worried face, then the passing students, some still pointing and whispering. Derek had been deliberate in his drive to isolate and shame her, each action designed to provoke her to a response that would be worth his brutality. Perhaps it was time to provide him with what he's anticipating. She shrugged off Marcus's hand and walked over to the door. Behind her, Marcus shouted, "Keisha, don't do this, it's not worth it." But some things were worth it. Her integrity was worth it. Her right to live in this school without being bullied was worth it. And sometimes, the only way to end a bully was to demonstrate to them that their victim could strike back. Outside, Derek and his boys were joking around in the parking lot, most likely gloating on their successful character assassination, that they seemed so smug with themselves, so self-assured of their authority. Keisha let her backpack fall at the school entrance and strode towards them with determination. It was time to have that talk Derek had been going on about, but this time, it would be her terms. Derek was still chuckling over the recording when he spotted Keisha heading towards him across the parking lot. His chuckling stopped as he saw her determined gait, the way she'd let her backpack fall like lifeless weight. "Well, well, look who chose to come and talk." Then Derek stood, Jake and Tommy standing by him on automatic. To apologize for being so unpleasant? Keisha halted 10 feet off, her voice smooth and steady. "I'm finished with your games, Derek. The phony recording, the harassment, all of it. This is over." "Oh, it's over when I say it's over." Derek's confidence expanded in front of his audience. Several students had paused to witness drama. "You think you can just walk into my school and show me no respect? Think again." "Your school?" Keisha moved forward. "One last I checked, this was a public, tax-sponsored institution. My mother," Derek's face reddened. "Don't get smart with me. You're outnumbered and outclassed. Walk away while you still can." "I tried walking away. You followed. I tried ignoring you. You escalated. I tried being reasonable." Another step closer. "Now we do this my way." Tommy cracked his knuckles. "You sure you want to do this? 3 against 1 doesn't look good for you. Neither does picking on someone you thought couldn't fight back." Keisha's voice stayed steady, but her stance moved slightly, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. "Last chance? Derek will leave me alone, and this does not have to get nasty." Derek laughed, the sound harsh in the afternoon air. "Oh, you're funny. What are you going to do? Call your mommy?" "I'm going to give you just what you've been wanting." The instant Derek reached for her arm, Keisha moved. Her training kicked in with fluid ease. She twisted from his grasp, took his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling. Before he could adjust, her elbow connected with his solar plexus, doubling him over. Jake lunged next, swinging wild and angry. Keisha ducked, swept his legs, and sent him crashing onto the pavement. Tommy flinched, suddenly aware that this was not according to script. Derek struggled for breath, but was seething. "You think you're tough? Let's see how tough." The brawl which ensued was merciless and effective. Derek had rage and bulk, but Keisha had finesse and 8 years of hard-won training. She flowed like water around his lurching efforts to take hold or strike at her, landing accurately where openings presented themselves. Jake and Tommy continued to try and assist Derek, but only managed to interfere with Derek or stumble themselves on the receiving end of Keisha's comebacks. The fight spilled onto the parking lot as Derek continued to charge, kept swinging, kept refusing to go down. By the time it was over, Derek faced forward on the pavement with Keisha's knee pressed between his shoulder blades. They'd covered almost half a block. Derek's nose streamed blood, Jake had a puffy eye, and Tommy clutched his ribs protectively. "Are we done?" Keisha asked, her breathing regular in spite of the effort. "Get off me," Derek wheezed. "Are we done?" she demanded, digging slight pressure. "Fine, we're through. You're gonna leave me alone. All 3 of you. No more games, no more harassment, no more doctored recordings. Are we clear?" "Yeah, we're clear." Keisha released him and moved back as Derek rolled over and sat up, blood seeping from his nose. The small group of witnesses stood in dumbstruck silence. "Good talk," she said, and walked back to the school to get her backpack. Meanwhile, inside the building, Principal Martinez was completing paperwork when her secretary knocked. "Mrs. Martinez, there had been some sort of altercation in the car park. Students were reporting there had been a fight." Principal Martinez let out a deep breath. and pulled on her jacket. How severe. Well, no ambulance has been called, but you should go take a look at this yourself. As the principal rushed outside, she could see Derek Morrison wiping blood off his face as Jake and Tommy assisted him to his feet. A group of students stood around, phones held high, excited murmurs in the air. "What happened here?" Principal Martinez asked.
Derek grumbled without making eye contact. "Just fooling around." "Derek Morrison, you're bleeding. That's not fooling around." "I fell," Derek said hastily. "Wasn't watching, tripped over my own feet." Principal Martinez raised an eyebrow. But before she could question further, Derek and his group were walking away. Derek having to lean heavily on Jake for support. The next morning, the gossip had already taken on legend. Some said Keisha had wielded weapons. Others said she'd taken on 5 guys. The reality was awe-inspiring enough, but high school rumor had never been limited by fact. During second period, Jessica Martinez, a sophomore with high-strung energy, walked up to Keisha at her locker, with her friend Amber trailing behind. "Hey," Jessica spoke softly, looking around to ensure they were not heard. "Can we speak with you about something?" Keisha eyed the 2 girls. Jessica appeared frightened but resolute. Amber looked poised to run at the first opportunity. "What's going on?" "We heard what occurred yesterday involving Derek and his friends," Jessica went on, "and we were wondering, would you be willing to assist with something like that?" "Similar? How?" Amber finally broke silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are these guys from Riverside High. They've been harassing us at the bus stop after school. Yesterday they—" She stopped talking, staring at Jessica. "They stole Amber's backpack and forced us to gather it all out as they stood and watched." Jessica added, "Said if we said anything, they'd make us regret it." Keisha closed her locker and turned to them, standing there. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Would you go with us to the bus stop today?" Jessica's voice quivered between hope and fear. "Maybe if they see you there, they'll leave us alone." Keisha glanced at their scared faces and remembered Derek's bloody nose, regarding the edited tape, regarding each of these little humiliations leading up to yesterday's altercation. "What time is your bus?" "At 3:15. Keisha and Amber and Jessica walked along Maple Street to the bus stop. The late afternoon sun stretched shadows between the houses, and a gentle breeze ruffled leaves overhead. The 2 girls hung close to her, their tenseness almost tangible. "They tend to arrive around 3:20, Jessica whispered, her eyes on her phone. "The bus doesn't arrive until 3:45, so they have more than enough time to—" "Do what, in fact?" Keisha asked. Amber's voice trembled a little. "Yesterday they huddled around us, told us we looked like we were lonely and needed some company. When I attempted to leave, one of them caught my arm and said I was being rude. Then they tossed my backpack and forced us to gather it all up as they stood and watched," Jessica added. "Said if we said anything, they'd make us regret it." Keisha nodded, her eyes scanning the street. "How many?" 3. Brad's the tall guy with bleached hair, Connor's got the sleeve tattoos, and Tyler's the guy who yanked Amber. At precisely 3:22, a battered Camaro pulled onto Maple Street, music blasting from its speakers. The car slowed when it pulled up to the bus stop, and 3 guys got out with the attitude of individuals who owned the block. Brad saw Keisha right away, his eyes narrowing in confusion. "Who's the new girl?" "Nobody," Jessica said hastily, "just waiting for the bus." Connor laughed, stretching the tattoos that traveled up his forearms. "Looks like somebody to me. Looks like somebody who doesn't fit in this neighborhood." Tyler moved closer to Amber, who stepped instinctively behind Keisha. "Did you come with backup, sweetheart? Not very nice." "Actually, I'm here to talk to you 3. Keisha's reply came clear and firm, her voice ringing out loudly in the still street. "I'm here to talk to you 3. Brad's eyebrows shot upwards. "A discussion about what? About how you're going to leave these girls alone in future?" The 3 boys looked at each other before bursting out laughing. Connor was wiping tears from his eyes dramatically. "Oh, that's rich. The cavalry has one girl who believes she's tough?" "I don't think anything," Keisha responded, in an even tone. "I'm just telling you that your harassment is over today." Tyler came even closer to Amber, intentionally intruding her space. "And what if we don't want to end anything? Then you'll find that some individuals don't make good targets.
Brad positioned himself to flank Keisha's left side while Connor moved to take the right. "You know what? I like you. You've got spunk. Why don't you ditch these losers and come around with some real men?" "I'm not interested in coming around with kids who are bullying children." "Children." Tyler's tone became mean. "These are kids old enough to learn some respect." He extended his hand to place on Amber's shoulder, and that is when Keisha shifted. Her left hand blocked Tyler's outstretched arm, twisting it from Amber, while her right hand hit his wrist. Tyler yelped and stepped back, cradling his arm. "What the—" Connor took a step forward, but Keisha was already shifting. "Last warning," she said, her posture balanced and set. "Walk away." Instead, Brad charged in from her left, while Connor approached from the right. Keisha dropped low, sweeping Brad's legs as she turned to take Connor to the midsection with an elbow. Both boys crashed hard onto the ground. Tyler, still clutching his wrist, pulled out his phone. "You crazy witch, I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," Keisha said, never breaking her gaze from Brad and Connor as they struggled to stand. "Tell them 3 high school boys got beat up while attempting to assault 2 younger girls. I'm sure that will go over well for you." Behind her, phone had been filming the whole encounter. "I got it all," she said, her voice louder now, including the section where Tyler attempted to grab Amber. Brad wiped blood from his broken lip, glaring at Keisha with increased respect and ire. "You have no idea who you're messing with. 3 cowards who pick on girls who are smaller than them? Yeah, I've got a pretty good idea." Connor hobbled back towards the car, his macho swagger totally punctured.
"This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Keisha told him firmly. "If I see any of you around these girls again, our next meeting won't be this civil." Tyler began to protest, but Brad caught him by the arm. "Come on, let's get out of here." As the Camaro sped off in a squealing of tires, Jessica set down her phone with trembling hands. "Oh my God, that was amazing! Are you two okay?" Keisha asked her. "Focus again on the girls." Amber nodded, relief tears in her eyes. "Thanks. I don't think I could believe you did that. They were banking on you being too afraid to stand up for yourself," Keisha stated. "Bullies always bank on that." The bus came around the corner, its brakes hissing as it pulled up to the stop. As they boarded the bus, Jessica was already posting the video to her social media sites. "Everyone needs to see this," she exclaimed. "Everyone needs to know someone's finally standing up to these creeps." Keisha got settled in, not realizing that Jessica's video was going to be posted hundreds of times before nightfall, propelling her from local legend to viral sensation overnight. By 7 p.m., Jessica's video had been shared more than 300 times. By 9 p.m., it had hit 1,000. The caption was, "Girl stands up to bullies harassing students at bus stop. Finally, someone fights back." Students from 3 school districts left comments, ranging from harrowing stories of harassment, intimidation, and abuse that had circulated in hallways. Suddenly, had a public voice. "This is the girl who beat up Derek Morrison, too. About time someone stood up to the Riverside crew. She should offer self-defense classes." Meanwhile, across town, Derek Morrison sat in his bedroom with an ice pack pressed against his still puffy nose, viewing the video for the 5th time. His phone vibrated with alerts, friends sending him the link, asking if this was the same girl who had embarrassed him. "This can't be happening," he grumbled, reading the comments. Someone had already put 2 and 2 together, posting about his own run-in with Keisha in the school parking lot. His phone rang. Jake's name appeared on the screen. "You seeing this, Jake?" Jake's voice was strained with rage. "Everybody's seeing this. My dad's already having questions about why I resemble having been hit by a truck. She's got us looking like total fools. First us, now the Riverside dudes? Quite a few people are calling her some sort of superhero." Derek's jaw was clenched. "She is not a superhero. She was simply lucky, twice." At once, in Riverside, Brad Matthews had been having a similar discussion with his crew. "How did we seem so weak?" Connor paced his garage while Tyler nursed his still painful wrist. 3 of us against 1 girl and got decimated because she could fight and we did not anticipate it?" Brad said, but his tone wasn't quite convincing.
Tyler played the video again. "Look at this. She doesn't even appear to be winded afterwards, and now everyone is calling us cowards and bullies? We are bullies," Connor snapped. "That's just the thing. Fear keeps people in line, but if word gets around that some high school girl can push us around, our rep is ruined." Brad concluded, "No one's ever going to take us seriously after this." Back at Millbrook High, the viral video was brewing a different kind of mayhem. Students who had been quiet for too long were suddenly speaking up. Principal Martinez came to school Monday morning to discover her voicemail packed with messages from parents. Some called for Keisha to be expelled for violence, others were thanking her for standing up for their children. Most just wanted to know why the school wasn't already working on the harassment their kids had been complaining about. Her secretary, Mrs. Chen, presented her with a pile of incident reports that had been filed over the weekend. 12 students reported harassment, of which all had seen the video and vowed they could no longer keep quiet about it. Principal Martinez flipped through the reports, her face growing increasingly distraught with every page. "How did we not know this? Some of these incidents occurred off campus. Others, well, the students claim they did report them, but nothing happened." During first period, Keisha was mobbed by students who wished to thank her, question her, or just be close to someone who had defied the system that had let them down. "You're like a real-life action hero," said Danny, whose own complaint chronicled months of bullying by upperclassmen. "I'm not a hero," Keisha responded. "I just got tired of being pushed around." But even as students were hailing her as a hero, the administration was racing to spin the story. Principal Martinez held an emergency meeting with the school board, where discussion soon turned to damage control. "The incident occurred off school grounds," Board President Walsh insisted. "We can distance ourselves completely from this." "Can we?" Principal Martinez pulled up the video on her laptop. "Because half the comments are about how our school has a bullying problem that we've been ignoring." Board Member Johnson leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that perhaps we should hear what these students have to say, rather than caring about our reputation." The meeting became heated as board members debated holding Keisha back or backing her up for fighting. In the meantime, a parent protest was being circulated on social media, calling for the school to enact self-defense classes and enhance student protection. By lunchtime, more than 50 students had signed up for a support group Jessica had organized. The group's purpose was simple: provide a safe haven for students who had been harassed and for more effective protection policies. As Keisha made her way down the hallways, she saw the shift in mood. Students who had previously avoided eye contact now tipped their heads respectfully. Teachers who had routinely overlooked veiled harassment were suddenly on their guard. But she also saw Derek and his group staring at her with naked hostility, and she knew that though she'd won 2 wars, the war wasn't won by any means. The viral video had afforded her a stage and an audience, but it had painted a larger target on her back than ever before. Tuesday morning, Keisha was summoned to the principal's office early, before first period. Principal Martinez sat behind her desk with the pinched look of someone who'd been up too long handling phone calls. "Please have a seat." Principal Martinez waved at the chair opposite her. "We need to talk about what went down at the bus stop." "Kids were being bullied. I intervened by resorting to physical violence." "Off-school grounds." Principal Martinez opened a folder on her desk. "I've had 17 calls from parents since yesterday. Some want you expelled, others want you awarded a death medal. The school board meets tonight and will decide what to do with you." Keisha kept her voice low. "Handle what situation?" "I stood up for 2 students who were being assaulted." "You assaulted 3 boys and put it on the internet." "I did not post anything, and those boys were bullying students from here." Principal Martinez massaged her temples. "Keisha, I know you were butting heads, and I am sorry, but taking the law into your own hands is not the solution. We have procedures, protocols. Your procedures did not prevent Derek Morrison from harassing me for a week. Your policies didn't safeguard Jessica and Amber against being taken and threatened." "That's not," Assistant Principal Martinez began, then ceased. "Look, I'm attempting to assist you here. The school board wishes this to pass quietly.
If you will comply with ceasing the physical interventions, we can likely avoid suspension. And if I do not comply, then we'll need to discuss further ramifications." Keisha stood up. "Is that all? Please consider what I've said. This course you're on, it's not viable." As Keisha left the office, she encountered Danny and 3 other students standing in the hallway. "We heard you received brought in," Danny said.
Hesitantly, "Are you in trouble, perhaps?" Keisha began to walk towards her locker. "Why?" "Because we wanted to ask you something." Danny hastened to catch up to her. "A group of us were discussing and we were wondering, would you show us what you know?" Keisha ceased walking. "Show you what?" "How to fight back, how to protect ourselves." Danny's voice intensified. "I've been getting pushed around since 7th grade. Yesterday, for the first time, no one bothered me. They're all afraid you might be observing." "That won't last forever." "Precisely. That's why we must learn to defend ourselves." A girl named Sarah stood up. "My older brother attends Riverside. He says those boys you fought are plotting something. They're angry and embarrassed." "What sort of something?" "He wouldn't tell, but he told me to watch my step coming home." Meanwhile, in the gym office, Coach Rodriguez was also having his own tough talk with Principal Martinez. "You want me to prohibit her from accessing the gym?" Coach Rodriguez folded his arms. "For what?" "For initiating an unsanctioned martial arts program. Parents are complaining this is a fight club. Have you seen what she's really doing? She's instructing kids to protect themselves. Basic moves, confidence building. It's just what half these students need." Principal Martinez sighed. "The insurance liability alone is less than what we'll encounter when one of these harassment situations becomes something more." Coach Rodriguez slouched forward. "Sarah, I've been instructing here for 12 years. I've never witnessed students more interested in physical fitness than they've been this week." "The school board doesn't agree?" "Then perhaps the school board needs to spend some time in the hallways observing how these children interact. Now, observing how the bullies suddenly found other activities to occupy their afternoons." That day, Keisha went to the gym and there were 30 students waiting for her. Word had gotten around. In spite of the administration's objections, students who never had talked to one another were bonding over shared experiences of harassment and the need to alter their circumstances. "I spoke to Principal Martinez," Keisha declared. "The school board doesn't want us gathering here." Disappointed murmurs spread through the group. "However," Keisha went on, "this is technically after-school hours, and Coach Rodriguez has given us permission to use the space." Coach Rodriguez came out of his office. "As far as I'm concerned, this is a fitness club geared towards self-defense and building confidence, totally within school guidelines." The students cheered, but Keisha raised her hand for silence. "Before we begin, everyone must realize something. This isn't about fighting. This is about having the skills and assertiveness to defend yourself and others. We don't seek out trouble, but we don't flee from it either." As she started instructing basic defensive positions, she caught sight of Derek and Jake standing at the glass doors of the gym. Their faces combined anger with something that could have been fear. Derek glanced at Jake. "Look at them. She's creating an army. What do we do about it?" Derek's grin was icy. "We ensure everyone knows that action has a price." Inside the gym, students learned to escape from wrist grabs and verbal de-escalation skills, unaware that their growing confidence was being interpreted as a direct threat by those who had benefited from their fear. By Friday, Keisha's self-defense class had expanded to more than 60 students. The corner of the gym was abuzz as teens practiced releasing holds, building confidence, and learning to convey strength through body language. "Remember," Keisha called out to the class, "the aim is always to de-escalate and escape safely. Fighting is last choice, not first option." Sarah, who had been quiet and reserved last week, now stood taller as she executed defensive maneuvers. "I don't know how much more different I can feel," she said to Danny during a water break. "Like, I actually have some say in what goes down on me." "Same," Danny said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Yesterday, when those seniors were trying to play me in the hall, I just stared them down and kept moving. They backed off." Coach Rodriguez observed from his office, making notes for his report to Principal Martinez. The change in these kids was amazing, not only physically, but in their whole attitude. They strode with more confidence, spoke with more self-assurance, and seemed to cover each other's backs in ways he'd never observed before. But while the program thrived within the gym, outside forces were arraying against it. That same Friday evening, Derek Morrison slumped in his car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, waiting. His nose had mended, but his pride was still broken. The video of his embarrassment had been seen more than 10,000 times, with comments that made him queasy. At 8:30, a battered Camaro pulled into the parking space beside him. Brad Matthews climbed out, followed by Connor and Tyler, all three having the same angry and frustrated look Derek felt. "Took you long enough," Derek said as they slid into the booth across from him and Jake. "Had to make sure nobody followed us," Brad answered, his voice tight. "Can't afford any more videos going viral." Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "I still think this is a bad idea. What if someone finds out we're working together?" "Nobody's gonna find out," Derek snapped, "unless you plan on running your mouth." Connor leaned forward. "Look, we all have the same problem. This girl caused us to look weak, and now everyone believes they can stand up to us. Our reputations are trash." "It's worse than that," Jake contributed. "She's training other kids to fight back. Yesterday, some freshman actually stood up for himself when I tried to mess with him." "A freshman!" Tyler gestured furiously. "Same thing's going on at our school. Kids who used to give up lunch money are suddenly developing spines." Derek took out his phone and played them a video from that afternoon's training session. 60 kids! She's got 60 kids learning to fight. In a month, it'll be 100. "So, what's your plan?" Brad asked. Derek's smile was cold, calculating. "We can't touch her physically anymore. Too many people watching, too many cameras. But we can ruin her legally." "How?" "Assault charges. My dad knows people in the legal system. We file complaints with the police, say she assaulted us without provocation, get her arrested, expelled, maybe even sent to juvenile detention." Connor frowned. "But there's video proof of what actually occurred." "Videos can be misleading," Derek said suavely, "especially when you have the right lawyer interpreting them to a judge. My dad's already spoken with our family attorney." "What about the bus stop thing?" Tyler asked. "That video's everywhere. 3 boys from high school and 1 girl. We'll say she was armed, that we were defending ourselves. Who's going to think we were trying to hurt those sophomore girls?" Jake nodded slowly. "And once she's in jail, her little fight club disintegrates. Kids go back to being afraid, and we go back to being in charge." Brad looked skeptical. "This could blow up in our faces. What if people don't think we're telling the truth?" "They will," Derek said matter-of-factly, "because my family has pull in this town and hers doesn't. Because we're the victims here, not her." The 6 boys spent the remainder of the hour strategizing. They would synchronize their accounts, file grievances at the same time, and show a solid front alleging that Keisha Williams was a menacing person who had assaulted harmless students for no reason. Meanwhile, at the school, Keisha was wrapping up the training session, having no knowledge that a legal trap was being laid for her. "Same time Monday?" Sarah inquired as students packed up their things. "Definitely. And remember, practice situational awareness over the weekend. Trust your instincts." As the students streamed out, excitedly discussing their success, Coach Rodriguez caught up to Cusa. "You've done something remarkable here," he said softly. "These children are different, stronger." "They were always strong," Keisha responded. "They just needed reminding. Be wary, though. Change unnerves some folk, especially people who gain from the status quo." Keisha nodded, putting her own stuff away. She'd sensed the tension all week, the way Derek and his friends regarded her, the hushed discussions that ceased when she got near, the feeling that something was brewing below the surface. What she didn't
Realize was that the storm was brewing, and it would put her combat skills to the test, and also test her belief in justice itself. Monday morning, Dr. Patricia Williams got the call that would change everything. She was going through patient charts at the hospital when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Dr. Williams, this is Sergeant Hayes with the Millbrook Police Department. We need you to come into the station with your daughter." Patricia's blood ran cold. "Is Keisha injured? What happened?" "She's not injured, ma'am, but assault charges have been brought against her. We have to bring her in for questioning." "Assault charges? Impossible. My daughter doesn't—" "Ma'am, we have 6 complainants. I recommend you get a lawyer." Patricia's hands trembled as she phoned Keisha's school, then her own supervisor to ask for emergency leave. By the time she arrived at Millbrook High, police were already present in the principal's office. Principal Martinez looked shaken as she outlined the situation. 6 boys from 2 schools have made formal complaints, accusing Keisha of assaulting them unprovoked. That's ridiculous, Patricia declared unequivocally. My daughter was defending herself and fending off other students. The accusers have a different version, Sergeant Hayes stated, going over his notes. They accuse her of systematically targeting and attacking male students. They're asking for restraining orders. When Keisha was summoned to the office, her cool demeanor faltered for the first time since she transferred to Millbrook. Seeing the anxious face of her mother and the stern look of the police officer, she realized that Derek's retribution had been in a shape she hadn't expected. "Am I under arrest?" she asked softly. "Not yet," said Sergeant Hayes, "but you'll have to go to the station for questioning. Your mom can take you." As news spread around the school that Keisha had been removed by police, the student body broke into a coordinated pandemonium. Jessica Martinez dissolved into tears when she heard about it. "This is my fault," she cried to Sarah. "If I hadn't uploaded that video." "No," Sarah insisted, surprising herself at her own forcefulness. "This is Derek's doing, and Brad's, and all the other bullies who don't like that someone finally stood up to them." In less than an hour, students were planning. Danny had started a group message called Justice for Keisha that had over 200 people signed up in 30 minutes. Videos of the bus stop attack were being reposted with step-by-step accounts of what actually happened. Marcus Thompson, who had attempted to warn Keisha weeks earlier, was now the leader of an unplanned protest in the cafeteria of the school. "They're trying to kill her for standing up to us," he told whoever would hear him, "for giving us the strength to defend ourselves." Meanwhile, at the police station, Keisha sat in an interrogation room with her mother and the court-appointed attorney Patricia had quickly called. "Tell me precisely what occurred," the attorney, Miss Rodriguez, said, "beginning with your first day of school." Keisha detailed everything. Derek's demand for protection money, the intensifying harassment, the doctored recording, the confrontation in the parking lot, and the bus stop attack. Her mother listened, increasing in anger as details came out that Keisha never said. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" Patricia asked, resentfully, apparent in her voice. "Because I thought I could take care of it myself, and because I knew that if you complained to the school, it would only make it worse." Miss Rodriguez took furious notes. "Do you have any proof of this harassment?" "Some. I took pictures of things they did to my locker. There may be security footage of some things that happened." Back at school, Coach Rodriguez was having his own angry conversation with Principal Martinez. "You know this is wrong," he explained, his voice tight with pent-up anger. "I've witnessed Derek Morrison and his buddies bully students for years. I've made reports, recommended interventions, suggested consequences, and what happened? Nothing. But then there's one girl who stands up to them, and now everybody's worried about violence in schools?" The discussion was interrupted by a knock on the door. Mrs. Chen walked in, looking overwhelmed. "Principal Martinez, there are roughly 50 students in the main hallway with signs. They're insisting Keisha's charges be dropped." "Signs? What do you call signs?" "Justice for Keisha. Stop defending bullies. She stood up to us. And there are parents coming too. Plenty of parents." Principal Martinez closed his eyes. "Call the school board president. Tell him we have a problem." As the protest intensified outside, Dr. Williams sat next to her daughter in the police station, watching her child bear the consequences for having the courage to resist injustice. "Whatever happens," Patricia whispered, "I'm proud of you." Keisha held her mother's hand, knowing that the battle for her freedom was merely starting, but also knowing she no longer fought alone. 2 weeks later, the evening before the trial, Keisha sat at her kitchen table rehearsing her testimony with Miss Rodriguez. The lawyer had become a tough fighter, working pro bono after witnessing the proof of pervasive harassment. "Remember," Miss Rodriguez instructed, thumping her pen against her legal pad, "stick to the facts. Don't let their attorney get you angry. That's what they want you to do." "What if the judge doesn't believe me?" Keisha asked, expressing the fear that had kept her up for nights. "Then we appeal. But I think you'll be amazed at how much support you have." Dr. Williams walked into the kitchen, holding a box of printed emails. "These are just from today," she said, placing it down heavily. "Letters of parental support, students, even educators from other schools who learned of the case." Ms. Rodriguez smiled. "The prosecutor's office is receiving similar mail. Public opinion is strongly on your side." Across town, Derek Morrison was having a very different conversation with his father's lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, a neatly dressed man with cold eyes and a pricey watch. "I want you to realize something," Blackwood said, his voice slicing through the tension in the Morrison family living room.
If any inconsistencies arise in your testimony tomorrow, this whole case collapses. Derek shifted awkwardly. There won't be any contradictions. There better not be. Because if it turns out that you've been lying, assault charges will be the least of your worries. Filing false police reports is a felony. Jake and Tommy looked at each other nervously from their spots on the leather couch. The gravity of what they'd done was finally starting to sink in as the trial neared. "What about the videos?" Tommy weakly asked. "People are going to see what actually happened. Videos can be removed."
From context, Blackwood responded smoothly. "That's why we're highlighting the record of violent acts. 6 isolated incidents make it more difficult to invoke self-defense." While Brad Matthews was confronting his own crisis of faith at the Riverside Boys emergency meeting, "I'm beginning to wonder if we made an error," Tyler said, pacing Connor's garage. "What if they have some evidence we're unaware of?" "Like what?" Brad lost it, but his voice sounded less certain than usual. "Security cameras? Witnesses? I don't know, but this entire thing just seems like it's spiraling out of control." Connor nodded grimly. "My dad tells me that if we lose this case, we can be charged with perjury. He's seriously considering bringing in our own lawyer." "Your dad's an idiot to be concerned about this," Tyler said, "because I heard something today." "So there are going to be like 20 students testifying on behalf of her tomorrow?" Back at Millbrook High, those 20 students were meeting in the school library for a last-minute run-through session led by Marcus Thompson and Jessica Martinez. "Recall," Marcus spoke to the group, "just tell the truth about what you saw and experienced. Don't embellish, don't insert details you're unsure about." Sarah held up her hand. "What if they try to make us appear dishonest?" "Then we remain calm and stay with what we said," Jessica responded, "because our stories are accurate." Danny shook her head resolutely. "I've been bullied by Derek for 3 years. Tomorrow, I get to tell someone in charge about what that was like." Coach Rodriguez, who had been sitting in the back of the room, came to the front. "I want each of you to understand how proud I am of your bravery. Standing in court takes the same kind of courage Keisha demonstrated in that parking lot." "Will you be testifying as well, Coach?" Sarah asked. "I will, and so will Principal Martinez, though she's not aware of it yet." The group looked stunned. Marcus scowled. "She's going to testify on behalf of Keisha?" "She's going to testify concerning the harassment complaints that were lodged and ignored, the course of conduct that brought them to this place. Ms. Rodriguez subpoenaed her this afternoon." As the session concluded, students embraced each other goodbye, aware that tomorrow would decide not only Keisha's destiny, but the future of their school's climate. That evening, Keisha remained awake, gazing at the ceiling, reflecting on all that had brought her to this point. 8 months ago, she'd been a reserved kid in Detroit, studying and training. Now she was the subject of a court case that had split her new community. Her phone rang with a message from Jessica. "No matter what happens tomorrow, you altered everything here. Thanks." Likewise, messages had been flowing all evening from students she had assisted, parents whose children had gained their voices, and even strangers who had watched the viral clips and drawn inspiration from her bravery. At 2 a.m., she finally managed to sleep soundly, knowing that in 8 hours she would stand outside that courtroom, bearing the hopes and worries of everybody who'd ever been bullied, everybody who'd ever been told to keep quiet, everybody who'd thought that fighting for what's right was worth it. The trial would decide her legal destiny, but the verdict had already been given by her community. She had given them the strength to think justice existed. The Millbrook County Courthouse hummed with anticipation as supporters occupied all seats available. Students, parents, and residents had come early to wait in a line that circled the building. Judge Patricia Thompson, a serious woman in her 50s, banged the court into order at 9 a.m. on the dot. "The state versus Keisha Williams, charges of assault in the second degree," she said. "Mr. Blackwood, you may proceed with your opening statement." Derek's lawyer stood tall, his pricey suit drawing attention. "Your Honor, this case is about a pattern of unprovoked violence committed by the defendant against 6 innocent young men.
We will demonstrate that Keisha Williams relentlessly attacked and beat my clients, resulting in physical injuries and emotional distress. He pointed towards Derek, who sat with his head hung low, playing the victim. These boys were just minding their own business when they became targets for the defendant's anger. The evidence will demonstrate that she is a dangerous woman who employs the use of her martial arts skills to threaten and hurt other people. Ms. Rodriguez stood up for the defense, her voice clear and strong. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of unprovoked attack, but a young woman defending herself and others against systematic harassment and bullying. The evidence will demonstrate that every move my client made was in reaction to increasing threats and actual physical aggression on the part of the complainants. The prosecution summoned Derek first. He went to the stand with rehearsed nervousness, describing a made-up version of events where Keisha had come after him aggressively in the cafeteria. I was just trying to be friendly to the new student, Derek testified, his voice shaking with feigned emotion. I volunteered to take her around, help her adjust. Instead, she became aggressive and threatened me. And what took place in the parking lot? Blackwood asked. She had me and my friends backed into a corner after school. We attempted to leave, but she pursued us. When I tried to defuse the situation, she attacked out of nowhere. Ms. Rodriguez, for cross-examination. Mr. Morrison, isn't it true that you extorted protection money from my client on her first day? I don't know what you're talking about. Isn't it also true that you produced an edited sound recording to shame her in the presence of fellow students? Derek's coolness wavered a bit. I never edited anything. We'll see about that. Ms. Rodriguez addressed the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit A. The courtroom was silent as the original, unedited version of Keisha's English class debate came through the speakers, followed straight away by Derek's edited version. The contrast was stark and unmistakable. Derek's face turned red as murmurs broke out throughout the courtroom. That was nothing but a joke you used to embarrass my client in the presence of 30 students. Objection, Blackwood phoned, but harm was done. The prosecution's case continued with Jake and Tommy giving the same made-up testimony, but their stories started falling apart on cross-examination. Tommy contradicted Jake's timeline, and Jake was unable to account for why security footage caught them bullying other kids on the same days they themselves said they were victims. When Brad Matthews testified on behalf of the Riverside Boys, his testimony fell apart even quicker. So you're reporting this to this court.
That 3 high school boys were threatened by one girl at a bus stop? She was aggressive, Brad muttered, which was repeated back to him as aggressive? Or standing up for 2 younger students against harassment. Ms. Rodriguez showed unedited video by Jessica, which evidently revealed Brad and his group threatening the girls before Keisha joined in the defense. It started with Marcus Thompson, whose evidence regarding Derek's 3-year campaign of bullying was heartbreaking. Student after student testified, each explaining instances of harassment that presented a vivid image of systematic intimidation. Jessica's tearful testimony regarding the bus stop encounter moved several jurors to tears. Tyler grabbed the arm of my friend when she attempted to leave. We were intimidated and outnumbered. Keisha rescued us. Sarah's testimony was as compelling. Derek and his crew made school hell for anyone they chose to target. Keisha gave us hope that somebody would finally confront them. Principal Martinez's grudging testimony regarding complaints of ignored harassment and the school's inability to shield students lent institutional credibility to the defense case. Ultimately, Keisha did testify herself. Her composed, measured answers stood in stark contrast to the complainant's fumbling evasions. I never wanted to fight with anyone, she said. I just wanted to be able to go to school safely. When that wasn't an option, I defended myself and others who couldn't defend themselves. During closing arguments, Ms. Rodriguez addressed the judge's sense of justice. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. My client behaved in self-defense against systematic harassment and assault. To punish her for standing up for herself and others would send the message that bullies can act with impunity while the victims of their lies get criminal charges for standing up.
Judge Thompson took 30 minutes of deliberation before entering the courtroom. The courtroom was on tenterhooks as she glared at Keisha. After considering all evidence and testimony, on this court's findings, the defendant is not guilty on all charges. In addition, I suggest the district attorney inquire about possible perjury charges against the complainants. The courtroom let out a collective cheer as Keisha hugged her mother and lawyer after finally being released from the legal threat over her head for weeks. The gavel's last bang rang out in the courthouse as Judge Thompson's words hung over the crowded courtroom. Derek Morrison sat immobile at the plaintiff's table, his skin pale as the dawning of perjury charges struck home. Behind him, his father's countenance had changed from assured dominance to barely checked rage. "You said this was a sure thing," Mr. Morrison snarled to Blackwood as reporters started moving forward. "You said the girl didn't have a chance." Blackwood was busy packing his briefcase, wanting to get away from the debacle. "Your son lied to me about the evidence. There's nothing that could be done once those recordings came out." On the other side of the aisle, Jake Wilson and Tommy Bradley sat in complete silence as their parents dealt with what had just transpired. Mrs. Wilson's face was pale with shock. "Perjury charges? That's a felony, isn't it?" "Mom, Jake began, but his mother stopped him. "We'll be talking about this at home, and you will be calling every family hit by this debacle to apologize in person."
Meanwhile, the Riverside boys were having their own comeuppance. Brad Matthews saw his meticulously built tough guy persona shatter as his father turned to head out without a word. Connor and Tyler trailed behind them. All bravado was lost. "This is crazy," Tyler whispered as they fought through the horde. "We can get arrested for this." "Should have considered that before you chose to lie under oath," Connor's mother snapped at the sound of, "I raised you better than this," as the complainants' families made their way out in shame. The courthouse party was just getting underway. Students who had testified enveloped Keisha with tears of relief and happiness. "You did it!" Jessica exclaimed, hugging Keisha. "You actually won!" "We did it," Keisha corrected, glancing around at all the faces that had rallied to her cause. "All of us together." Dr. Williams was standing close by, watching her daughter with pride and awe. The quiet girl who had recently moved from Detroit a few months prior had become a symbol of bravery for an entire community. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she whispered when Keisha arrived at her. "Not only for winning, but for the way you reacted to everything." Miss Rodriguez gathered up her papers with satisfaction. In 20 years of practice, she'd hardly ever seen a case where justice seemed so obvious. "The district attorney will most certainly pursue perjury charges," she informed the Williams family. "Bogus police reports, lying under oath, these boys have some serious legal problems in front of them." Beyond the courthouse, news vans filled the sidewalk as reporters spoke with students, parents, and community members regarding the landmark case. The tale had spread beyond Millbrook into a national discourse on bullying, self-defense, and institutional failure to support students. "This is a message," Marcus Thompson said to a reporter surrounded by dozens of students. "You can't intimidate folks and then claim victim status when they fight back." The weeks after the trial brought sudden changes to Millbrook High. Principal Martinez, spooked by her courtroom testimony regarding disregarded harassment reports, installed new policies for dealing with bullying complaints. Zero tolerance became real zero tolerance, not empty words in a book. Derek Morrison did not return to school. The perjury charges, along with the civil suits brought against him by some of the families whose children he had harassed, resulted in his attending a private military academy 3 states away. His parents secretly sold their home and relocated, unable to confront the community in which their son's atrocities had been made public. Jake Wilson and Tommy Bradley entered pleas of guilty to making false police reports, were sentenced to community service and probation. Both were ordered to receive counseling and take anger management classes. Jake's college scholarship was taken away, and Tommy was suspended from the football team for life. The Riverside boys received similar treatment. Brad Matthews was expelled and charged with several counts of harassment by victims who stepped forward after the trial.
Connor and Tyler were suspended, pending their own court proceedings, their reputations in ruins. But the most dramatic change arrived in the guise of Keisha's self-defense program, which was not just officially endorsed, but was school-wide, extended 3 months later. Coach Rodriguez stood in the large gymnasium, observing more than 100 students undergo what was now referred to as the Student Empowerment and Safety Program. The waiting list had become so long that they'd instituted evening sessions and weekend workshops. "I never thought it would get this large," he said to Keisha as she took a group of freshmen through some basic defensive moves. "Neither did I," Keisha responded, repositioning a student's posture. "But I believe people were ready for something like this. They just needed permission to believe that they could be strong." The program had grown past physical self-defense to encompass conflict resolution, bystander intervention training, and peer mediation. Students learned not only how to defend themselves, but how to identify and interrupt bullying before it began. Sarah, one of Keisha's first students, now worked as a peer instructor for younger children. "The best part isn't learning to fight," she said to a group of nervous 7th graders. "It's learning that you don't have to be scared anymore." The transformation was visible all along the school hallway. The dynamics had fundamentally changed. Students moved with greater confidence, spoke up more easily, and most importantly, stood by one another when challenges did arise. Danny, once the constant target of Derek, now had a peer support group for students that suffered from anxiety and depression over previous bullying. "Keisha didn't simply instruct us on defending ourselves physically," he told new members. "She taught us that we deserve to feel secure and that we can make it so." The ripple effects reached beyond Millbrook. Other district schools asked for similar programs, anti-bullying groups around the country called for consultation, college recruiters began to recognize Keisha's leadership and community effect. On a quiet spring afternoon, 6 months since the trial, Keisha sat in the same cafeteria where Derek had initially demanded protection money. But now the mood was entirely different. Students from various grades and social cliques sat together, dialogue was more lively, and the undercurrent of tension that had previously characterized the room did not exist. Danny walked up to her table with a letter in her hand. "This came to the main office for you," she said with a smile. Keisha opened the envelope and discovered that there was a handwritten note from a student in a school in California. "I saw your story on the news and started my own self-defense group here. We have 30 members now and 0 bullying incidents this semester. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to accept being treated badly." "Another one?" Marcus asked, settling into the seat on the other side of her. "Another one," Keisha confirmed, adding the letter to the growing pile she kept in the locker that served her in many capacities. As she glanced around the changed cafeteria, then out windows to where students were practicing confidence-building exercises in the courtyard, Keisha thought about how much everything had changed from that first day that she'd denied Derek's protection money. She'd come to Millbrook hoping to keep trouble at bay and just get through school quietly. Instead, she'd learned that sometimes the most vital battles are the ones you don't pick. They pick you. And sometimes, standing up for what's right transforms not only your own life, but the lives of an entire community. The bell rang, and the students ended lunch by picking up their things and going to class. They walked with energy and a sense of confidence that would have been unimaginable a few months prior. Keisha smiled as she gathered her own belongings. Her mother had been correct about Millbrook being different from Detroit. It was different. It was better. And she had helped to make it so by walking through hallways that had previously felt aggressive, surrounded by students who had discovered their voices and their power. Keisha Williams understood that there are battles worth it, all that you invest. I hope you liked that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss the next one. Meanwhile, I have personally selected 2 stories for you that I believe you will like. Have a wonderful day.